through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do, to get the fraud, waste, and abuse out of our federal government. Thank you, guys.
What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. USAID. It is the biggest scam in taxpayer history, and we are going to talk about it. Shout out to everybody watching. Drop your comments down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. We're going to talk about USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. Here's some things that might blow your mind because this has been in the intrawebs a lot the last couple days, specifically with the introduction of DOGE into the government. We're talking about, here are some things that USAID has spent money on. $20 million for Sesame Street in Iraq, $56 million to boost tourism in Egypt, $40 million to build schools in Jordan, $11 million to tell Vietnam to stop burning trash, $27 million for gift bags for deported Central Americans. These claims, these situations are complete fraudulent. USAID is about to be exposed through the support of DOGE.
Late last week, a government agency called USAID went dark. They went dark on social media. Their website was taken down. No notice. Nobody really knew why, but people started to kind of freak out. They were like, what is going on? It was started by John F. Kennedy, and it was started to spend billions of dollars annually across the world in an effort to alleviate poverty, treat diseases, respond to famines, natural disasters, etc., etc. Like many things, it was started with the best of intentions, but then JFK died. Now, if you listen to what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has to say,
USAID, which is a CIA front, put $5 billion into funding those riots. Those riots lead to a coup d'etat against the first democratically elected government of the Ukraine.
He's on to talk about Victoria Nuland and how that phone call was leaked because she had already picked the new government for Ukraine before the old government was even sent out, which explains why there's so much conversations about Ukraine all the time. And that's also how we ended up with Zelensky. And like, okay, they're corrupt, so what government agency isn't? But why did they go dark then? Because when Elon Musk and DOGE came in to do their inspection, USAID blocked from accessing classified information during an inspection. So DOGE unceremoniously just shut them down until they could gain the access. This morning, more than 600 USAID employees have been locked out of the agency's computer systems overnight, and the rest had received emails saying that at the direction of the agency leadership, the headquarters building will be closed to agency personnel on Monday, February 3rd. All of this went down because of the direction of Donald Trump that he gave to DOGE, all because USAID would not give DOGE permission to view their files. Wonder why? Why won't you just let them come in and do their audit? Like, everything's corrupt. Like, it's just a matter of how corrupt. USAID was desperate to not want DOGE in there snooping around at all. I don't have a choice because it seems like everybody's been placed on leave.
Musk writing, USAID is a criminal organization. Time for it to die.
To be clear, in shutting down, which we're in the process of doing, shutting down USAID.
About 100 staffers were placed on leave after the agency refused to give Musk's team access to classified material. The team was eventually given that access. The Trump administration has already faced legal hurdles while pushing to gain more control of government spending.
Imagine being so terrified as to what a government arm is going to find within your agency that you are actually going to take it to court to say, hey, I don't think that we should be looking into why we're spending so much money on frivolous things. Still trying to decide, though, if it's frivolous or if it's fraudulent. Okay, because I watched this video where they spent like $2.5 million on like K-Cups, the Starbucks K-Cups for coffee at the Pentagon. That's an awful lot for K-Cups. Like, how are you even, but you're not. So it's either one of two things. Either you're pocketing the money that's coming in from the taxpayers, or it's money laundering, or I guess it could be a third thing. And the money that you're saying is going to K-Cups is actually going to like black ops projects or like deep government seeded projects that you don't want people to know about. None of which are any good for the American people, and none of which is what we agreed to do when we send our tax payments every month.
Now, just to recap, just so you guys have the origins of USAID. So we're all up to speed here. USAID was funded in 1961 by John F. Kennedy. Under the Foreign Assistance Act, created initially as humanitarian and development aid to combat poverty and promote economic growth. The main mission at the time during the 1960s was provide aid to countries in need. The hidden agenda over time happened. USA has been repeatedly linked to covert operations, regime change efforts, and get this, political interference. You with me? USAID regime change operations. Cuba, i.e., they created an entire fake social network. USAID created Zunio. Okay, I think I'm pronouncing that right. A Cuban version of Twitter disguised as social network. The goal was to incite anti-government protests and destabilize the Castro regime. The outcome, the project was exposed in 2014, and USAID was caught using taxpayer money to fund this political subversion. Young recruits from Venezuela, Costa Rica, and Peru were sent to Cuba under the pretense of humanitarian workers. But the real mission here with this whole situation was to recruit local individuals to encourage anti-government activism. So what they did, they created these covert situations as aid prevention workshops described in internal memos as the perfect excuse for covert operations. USAID organized HIV prevention workshops in Cuba, not for public health, but as a tool to infiltrate these networks. Internal documents confirm the workshops were just a front for political influence. The operation failed, and USAID credibly took another hit.
The accusations basically floating around. USAID is a CIA front for revolution and soft coups in foreign countries to align them with U.S. interests, and it's used to funnel money to elect deep state bureaucrat cronies. The reason why we have a uniparty shill government, because they're all propped up by this invisible money. The U.S. government has unlimited coffers. Money flows through USAID into various different foundations. That money flows back to fund election campaigns for those that are marching in lockstep with the deep state. And as it goes, and I'm saying these are allegations. I don't know, we'll see what happens. We may get a ton of really, really weird information coming out of this. You thought the Twitter files were bad? Wait till you see the USAID files.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. The USAID financial black hole, where does all the money go? Allegations. Now, I got to say this for the YouTube purposes. Allegations suggest that less than 10% of USAID funds actually reach their intended recipients. Billions of taxpayer dollars are funneled into these ambiguous programs with little or no accountability. Watchdog organizations and whistleblowers have repeatedly questioned USAID's spending transparency. This is one of the main reasons why they went dark when DOGE and Elon asked for files.
Today, Samantha Power heads USAID, handpicked by the Biden administration for her breadth of experience in foreign policy. USAID is, of course, America's foremost agency in the way of global soft power, distributing aid like food and medical supplies to needy countries all around the world. But USAID is also a well-known front for the CIA and its operatives to covertly function behind the cloak of humanitarian causes. All of this making this UK-born, Yale and Harvard-educated woman the perfect person to lead such an agency during such a volatile time in living history. Joining us now to discuss this controversial Biden admin official is Jim Jatras, who's no slouch on foreign policy himself. Jim is a retired U.S. diplomat and former GOP Senate foreign policy advisor. Also, one of my favorite brains to pick. Jim, thank you for being with us today. So tell me, Samantha Power, butcher of Yemen, architect of Libya. Too harsh?
No, I don't think it's harsh at all to call her the butcher of Yemen, Libya, whichever country you want to pick. The only quarrel I would have would be if somebody's tried to stick the word "the" in front of it, because certainly she was not the only one. I mean,
USAID or USAID's role in political meddling. USAID has been accused of funding political oppositions in multiple countries. Instead of humanitarian aid, funds are allegedly, I got to say this for the YouTube, allegedly directed towards opposition groups hostile to U.S. unfriendly regimes. Allegations have surfaced that USAID supporting anti-government factions in Latin America and the Middle East. Musk claims USAID funded bioweapons research, including C-19 studies linked to the lab leaks that we recently discovered through Anthony Fauci. Whistleblower recently exposed USAID's international corruption. Mark Moyar, a former USAID official, exposed the deep corruption and bureaucracy. Key findings are in his book, which I'll place for a link for that in the description down below. Identified 5 corrupt USAID officials engaging in fraudulent activities. When he reported them, he was apparently retaliated against. A special operation generally falsely accused him of leaking classified information, leading to his security clearance being revoked. These corrupt officials, not only were they not punished, but one of them was promoted and another transferred to another federal agency to avoid consequences. Moyer reached out to multiple inspectors at the general office to report the corruption. All investigations were brushed off. Even Senator Chuck Grassley was stonewalled when he tried to get the answers. Here is a throwback of USAID Director Samantha Power directing the unprecedented amount of cash from U.S. taxpayers to give to the Ukraine government, of which, by her own admission, is falsely corrupt.
One of the things that Congress has given USAID since this full-scale invasion began is an unprecedented amount of money in direct budget support, which sounds kind of obvious. Of course, we would do that. We want to stand with Ukraine, but it's totally unprecedented, this kind of scale of investment. And we're talking along the lines of about $15 billion in a sense, cash to the Ukrainian government, which was famously corrupt, you know, in past years and still has work, as you noted, to do on corruption today.
Now, here is the bigger picture with USAID as a tool for global influence. USAID's mission versus reality. The public image helping the world through humanitarian aid, which we've recently discovered in this video that it is all just a front. It is a front for U.S. intelligence operations, political manipulation, and financial corruption. Many of USAID's high-ranking officials have ties to CIA and military intelligence. If USAID is being used as a weapon for regime change, then taxpayers are unknowingly funding global political instability. The lack of transparency, accountability raises a lot of serious questions about who is really in control.
USAID employee that was falsely using an office supply retailer's mailing address. You know, think like Staples and places like that. Using that address in Virginia to defraud the taxpayers by claiming higher Washington, D.C. locality pay, but they were actually living in another state full time. And they had the full knowledge and assistance of their supervisor in pulling off this scam. And then the IG, the USAID IG, blew off my request for an investigation.
What did they give? That seems complete. I mean, how can they do that?
They can.
How can they do this?
This is the problem we have, is that there are checks and balances in place where we can write letters all day and we can request IG oversight. But if that IG says, I'm not going to investigate, I'm not interested, I, as a United States Senator, don't have the power to force them to do it. And this is why I'm so excited that we have DOGE and that we have a president that's willing to back
Yes,
us up.
absolutely. So really, none of this could be done without the full support of the president. With regard to the USAID stuff, I went over it with him, in detail, and he agreed with that we should shut it down. I mean, that's I want to be clear. That's I actually checked with him a few times. Said, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes." So we're shutting it down. It's also incredibly politically partisan and has been supporting radical left causes throughout the world, including things that are anti-American, which is insane.
Right. And that's why, there are probably some arguments to be made about what could be important work that falls under USAID. But the
Hmm.
fact of the matter is that it has been overshadowed by these
Yes.
bad actors.
Yes.
So if there are truly good pro-American programs, then let's move them to the State Department.
Exactly.
Let's make sure we have proper oversight.
Exactly.
Let's make sure that when senators and congressmen are asking for documents, that they provide them in a timely manner.
Yes.
Let's make sure the IGs are upfront and honest and wanting to be the watchdog over the agencies that they are charged with. I mean, this is not rocket scientist, and
Yes.
you're a rocket scientist.
But this
Elon.
is simply common sense, and being responsive to the electorate. That's you just can't have these sort of institutions which are taking lots of taxpayer money, but then are not answerable to elected representatives of the public. Then they're totally disconnected. So I call it like we must move away from rule of the bureau to rule of the people.
After Elon's shocking post about only 10% of U.S. aid going to their funds, only 10% of it is going to the intended recipients. I found this clip a while back from PBS. This was on January 5th.
But overseas assistance programs have long come under fire from some conservatives, like Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, who see them as wasteful and misplaced.
We should be conserving our resources, particularly conserving them for our country. There's not a great deal of evidence that the money that we, launder throughout the world really over time has been a benefit to us. There's a great deal of evidence that much of it's been stolen. We mentioned corruption.
The criticism no longer comes just from some Republicans, but increasingly from those who strongly favor foreign aid. They say it helps buy goodwill, helps America's standing vis-a-vis Russia or China, keeps infectious diseases at bay, and helps turn dependent countries into trading partners. At least it's supposed to do that. But these critics say only a small portion of aid dollars are actually spent in the countries targeted for help.
It's actually less than 10% of our foreign assistance dollars flowing through USAID is actually reaching those communities.
Walter Kurz, with a group called Unlock Aid, formed in 2021 to draw attention to a system in which a relative handful of private companies called implementing partners are awarded most contracts by USAID.
One of the best things that government can do is to move away from measuring success in terms of outputs, how much money do we spend on a particular problem, and moving toward an orientation of results.
A lot of people will be shocked to hear that that's not the case.
Well, it's true. About 98% of USAID grants pay for activities and not results.
And the results are not flattering, according to the agency's own Inspector General's office, which studied USAID awards for 3 years, 2017 to 2019.
43% of them failed to achieve about half of the intended results. But in spite of that, they still got paid in full almost every time, and sometimes more.
He says one reason for these poor results is that implementer companies rarely work with communities targeted for help or with local aid groups.
One study found that when working with a local partner as opposed to an international aid contractor, you could find savings of upwards of 32% alone, and that's a conservative estimate.
And one reason that does not happen is compliance with strict guidelines written by Congress. Here's Idaho Republican Senator Jim Risch.
Corruption with U.S. dollars will not be tolerated, and I'm glad to see detailed information that gives me confidence that our money is being used appropriately.
They went to the groups that can absolutely deliver on a contract every time so that no one in this mix is accused of fraud, waste, or abuse.
But it's compliance, it's not delivering results that improve people's lives.
And that's the quiet part that no one wants to say out loud.
Ouch.
Justin Richmond is an Army veteran who later worked with USAID in Afghanistan. In 2015, he founded a nonprofit that collects and analyzes data on conditions in conflict-torn areas, working with local community leaders to learn what they see as the most pressing needs and to learn the root causes of the conflict or suffering. He says he's found few takers among aid companies.
The for-profits aren't properly subcontracting down to the experts. They're keeping everything in-house because, again, no one's checking on them, no one's trying to have impact.
Richmond told me he once shared findings gathered in the conflict-ridden Sahel region of West Africa with the largest aid implementing company, Chemonics. Data that he said would be useful to improve the outcome of development projects.
She looked at it and at the end said, "This is phenomenal work. You should really be proud of it, especially where you collected it. Incredible. But you got to tell me, why would we ever do this?" I was speechless, and she said to me, "If USAID isn't paying us to do that, we're not going to do that." The client didn't even ask for it.
We invited Chemonics to comment. They declined, as did the main trade group of aid implementing companies.
Moving forward, we are going to provide at least a quarter of all of our funds directly to local partners over the course of the next 4 years.
At the time Administrator Power made that pledge in 2021, local partners got just about 7% of award dollars. The agency has moved to simplify the grants process, also requiring some new contracts to phase in locally led control. That percentage has since hovered near 10%, still well short of the target. Power declined request for an interview, as did Mark Green, her predecessor from the first Trump administration.
It's not easy. It takes time. 4 years isn't enough time.
Brian Atwood was USAID administrator during the Clinton administration. He traces some of the agency's current problems back to his tenure at the end of the Cold War.
People said they wanted a peace dividend. The peace dividend didn't come out of the Defense Department. It came out of USAID. So I lost 10% of our employees.
At the same time, the agency added all of Europe's former Eastern Bloc nations to its workload, which continued to grow, he says.
When I was aid administrator, the overall budget was around $12 billion. It's now more like $38 billion. And we haven't seen an equal increase in the amount of staffing, what they call operations expenses. And so the consequence was they had to push everything out the door to larger organizations.
That outsourcing has become the norm today, Atwood says, and it's easier to manage fewer and therefore larger grants with companies familiar with the process.
You guys to figure out.
All this has had the effect of shutting out a lot of innovation that could improve people's lives, says Unlock Aid's Walter Kerr.
You can look at some of the amazing organizations, entrepreneurs that are already active in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and deliberately identify them and begin to scale up their impact. They're out there.
We are able to trace every single drug in this warehouse right to the patient's home.
One example he cites is M-Pharma, a chain of pharmacy-based clinics across Africa. Founder Gregory Roxon says the big USAID contractors are not focused on delivering results, but rather on writing grants and glossy reports.
The goal was never to eradicate the problem. It was to create the appearance of eradicating that problem.
That keeps the spigot of foreign assistance open, he says, but the dollars flowing mostly between the U.S. government and companies most based in Washington, D.C.
This recent article from AP, Trump and Musk move to dismantle USAID, igniting a battle with Democrats and lawmakers. Here's what needs to happen, at least in my personal opinion. More independent audits on USAID spending, greater transparency on the foreign aid programs, not just glossy reports, actually helping people, and investigations into USAID's role into bioweapon research and political meddling, because there have been a lot of accusations accusing USAID of these particular roles, and protection against whistleblowers exposing corruption. USAID, was originally created to help people, but it has been reportedly exposed as a tool for covert operations and political interference. Based on their recent actions, presumably, these allegations are possibly true. It is definitely time for a major reckoning, and this is where DOGE is coming in. The question is, at the end of the day, is anybody going to be held accountable? Let me know what you think about all of this. Drop it down in the comment section down below, smash the like button, share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.